Good afternoon. It is Sunday, December 29th, 2024, and I'm going to be talking about my own journey to the Orthodox Church, the Orthodox faith, returning to it, and I just thought it would be a good thing to talk about since I'm always talking about the faith. You might want to know where I got my faith from and how my background on that. I apologize if my cat starts crawling around. She's in the closet next to me, but she may interrupt. Anyway, I'm going to start with my parents. So my mom is from Greece, and my dad is from America. I think he was born in Oklahoma and grew up in Kansas. And my mom has always been a Greek Orthodox Christian. And then my dad was a non-practicing Protestant. I don't know the specific sect of Protestantism. I think it might have been Presbyterian, but he didn't really practice any of that. So that's what we know as his background. I was baptized at age 1 in a Greek Orthodox church in Kansas, where my grandmother lived. And I was baptized and chrismated there. Chrismated, in case somebody's wondering what that is, that means you confirmed, for those who understand confirmation. So in the Orthodox Church, you do both at the same time. No, not at the same time, but one right after the other. So you get baptized, you get chrismated, you're given you're anointed with the seal of the Holy Spirit, the oil. And then you are actually given his body and blood for the first time. So I was a year old then. However, I didn't grow up, my parents didn't teach me the teachings of Christ or the biblical scriptural tenets or teachings of Christ through the Bible. I didn't even know if we had one then. So I was pretty clueless when it came to that. My mother, I always wonder, but I think the reason why she didn't share too much of her faith, because the generation she grew up in, you just followed the traditions of your mother and your grandmother, your grandparents. And so she followed the traditions that were done. My Yaya, my grandmother, my Greek grandmother, Yaya, Yaya was very much involved in following the saints, the days that you remember the saints. So she was involved in that. She knew all the special holy days, feast days, and all that. And that's what she knew. So I think my mom kind of followed on that, and she knew a certain extent on that. But biblical teachings or all that, I don't think she really knew that. So she couldn't really pass on what she didn't know. And my dad was not practicing, so he was not involved in that as well. But my dad was big on the main truths of honesty, being honorable and honest and a good person. And, so I grew up with those, what you're supposed to do, what's the right thing to do, and what you don't want to do, the wrong things. So for instance, you don't steal, you don't take things that don't belong to you. You are polite, you wait to get married before you have intercourse. All the basic things that you would expect that a parent would think, especially in that time. Still applies now, but so they did have some tenets that matched biblically, but I mean, I knew there was God the Father, and I knew that he had a son, and that his son died on the cross for us. That was the extent of what I knew about my Orthodox Christian faith. I do know that I had this idea of who God the Father was. I felt that he was a fatherly sort. I would have these ideas, in my head. I think it might have been that he was there. I just didn't know too much, because what a child knows is what a child knows. And I do remember that I did not ever use bad language, because my parents were, you don't speak like that and all that. And I never did, when I was a kid, I never did. And throughout my school years, all the way through high school, I don't recall using language, because in my grade school years, I really had this idea that God would strike me down if I used a bad word. And my parents never told me this. My parents didn't say, God's going to get you if you do. I just thought that on my own. I do attribute that to being baptized and receiving the Holy Spirit. I think you have a connection there. You just don't, I just didn't know all of that, what that meant. Now, my mom did take us to a couple of Greek Orthodox churches in Greece when my dad was stationed in Germany. And so those 3 summers, we would go and spend with my yaya in Greece, with my mom and my sister, and my dad would stay home and work. And he was in the military. He was in Air Force, and a lawyer. He ended up being a colonel, and he was a lawyer, and then he was a judge. And so, as you could see, the right and wrong, and how to be, he was in the right job for sure, and he was a very good a defense lawyer, but a very good also judge. So a very calm person, never would yell at you. He was just really measured and a really good father. But he didn't know too much about the faith, and he wasn't involved in that. So Mom took me and my sister to a couple of the church services, the liturgies in Greece. It was the church that she got married in, and it was down the street from where Yaya's apartment building was, where we were staying. She owned apartment buildings, and my aunt, my Thea, she was close by in a home that was not too far from where Yaya lived, and we would hang out with our cousins. There were two, and so the 2 cousins, and so that was my exposure to the church at that time. And I remember I didn't understand anything that was going on there. I didn't understand the words because they were all in Greek. And I just remember being in this pew, and I remember my mom would take us up in line to receive communion. And I just remember that I did not like the taste of the communion, I was like, in any case, there was one time that we went to a Protestant service. It was at one of those generic buildings for on a military base for faiths to use for their particular religion. And so there was this plain white room, and this minister was in there talking for I don't know how long. It must have been an hour. Felt like a long time. And I just don't remember too much. I just remember that I was bored, and my dad had jabbed me, and he was pushing me on the side like, wake up. So, that was kind of how it was. And anyway, so that was my experiences growing up. So I knew of God the Father and, his son, like I said, all of this that I told you that I knew, those 2 things. Because, Mom didn't know doctrine or dogma or the eschatology or anything. She didn't know the Bible, what that was, the teachings of Christ in there. So that's all I knew for most of my life, throughout my early 20s. And I became one of those people that, spiritual but not religious. And I didn't go to church. You don't have to go to church to believe in God. I believed in God. I don't know what that actually meant and what God was I talking about, But in any case, that was what I was doing in my early 20s. And at the same time as that, I was reading dream dictionaries to try to interpret my dreams, and consulting with a psychic, going to a psychic a couple times, and following my sign, my astrological sign, and you'd get in the newspapers or whatever. You would look at those and figure out what's going to happen with your life, and all these things that are trying to tell me, of what's going on and what's going to happen in my future. I was a very mixed up person, had a lot of personal issues with insecurities, relationships. There were a lot of issues there that I felt like I had to know. And I think at that time, when I was 20, I started having panic attacks. And then when I was 22, I ended up with anxiety. So I think people with those conditions tend to want to know something up front because they need a security. They need something that's rooted and not unknown stuff. That's just, I think, part of how people who have anxiety and panic attacks can feel, that they need some kind of grounding. So I think that was why I was getting into that. That's my guess. I've thought about it over the many years, but I think that was the main thing. I was miserable, and I was living a life all about myself, selfishness, and I was, there was an ex-boyfriend that I still liked, and there was just all this weird stuff that, I was involved in obsession over him, and it wasn't healthy. And then I had troubles with my roommate, and all these things were coming down. But then, about that time, my sister, who was living down in Louisiana, near Bossier City, Shreveport area, she was a little bit south of that. She married a man down there, and he converted to Orthodoxy, and she decided to go to the Greek Orthodox Church up in Shreveport, because where she was out in the boondocks, and so she wanted to go. Her initial reason of going was to have community, socializing, finding friends, and she did, and she ended up in the choir. But in any case, she became involved in the church before my parents and I, and she began to be really involved in that, and started to discuss it in a way. She was in the choir, so she was talking about that, but she had some thoughts on things, about other faiths and everything, and I was just like, okay. I didn't really think much of it because I wasn't really into that then. But my parents started going to church, and I think it was in 1995. And they decided to go one Holy Week. They decided to go to a few Holy Week services, and they invited me, and so I think I ended up at like the Holy Friday night service. I don't quite remember. I do remember, though, distinctly that the first church service I went to at that time in 95, the sermon that Father Dean had given was all about not serving two masters. And you cannot be, you should not be consulting tea leaves, psychics, went down that road. And I was so taken aback, almost shocked that was brought up at that time. And I don't think that was a coincidence. I don't believe in coincidence. But, as soon as I heard that, I realized, oh my gosh, I'm doing something that's against God. It really struck me. So I went home after that and threw away my tapes that I had. The psychic had taped our conversation. I threw those away. I threw away my dictionary book, all that stuff, astrology stuff, threw it all out. I remember my roommate at the time was like, what are you doing? I said, well, no, we can't have these. In any case, later on, things got contentious with my roommate, and he read my diary, and I was all miserable because I was still hung up on this this ex-boyfriend. That ridiculous, really. But I just had so many issues then. I was looking for somebody to love, but then at the same time, I didn't really love myself, and I had such insecurities, so many problems, low self-esteem, everything, selfishness, all that, pride. And, those things you always have to contend with for your whole life, at least I do. But at that time, it was really bad. And I just remember something happened to me spiritually, and it really woke me up. And I think it was the Holy Spirit, that because I couldn't figure out why I went to church. I didn't know why I was going to church. So I knew it had to be the Holy Spirit that led me there. Because then I was like, oh, okay, let's go. I had no reason to go. So it had to have been that. And I woke up from all this. And the next, I just told God I'm sorry. And there was a very weepful night. I wept that night. And the next morning, I just told him, I'm going to do, because I was always running into walls because I was just always doing my will. So I told him I would do, I would follow his will. It was very difficult. I had to let go of all that. And the next morning, I woke up at peace. There was a peace that I hadn't felt before. And as soon as I made that decision to follow him, I needed to move out of the apartment because my roommate left. We had an argument. And so I called the landlady and I was like, how am I going to afford, we need to move because he's not here anymore and I'm not. And so, everything kind of just fell into place after that when I had to move. My parents had moved to Louisiana at that time and they wanted to be around the grandkids, my sister's kids. So I ended up saying, okay, I'm going to go there too with my family. And everything, the doors opened easily for me to get down there, get a job and all that. And so I think that was part of the reason why it's because I finally let go at that time of this hitting my head against the wall, trying to do my will that was not to be. And so at that point, I started going to church. And then down in Louisiana, I went to a mission church for quite a while. I met my then soon-to-be husband. And he took me to a Baptist church in a gym. And I just recall that I never felt, it felt very empty for me. It was not in my tradition. I didn't understand. Even the few times I'd been to church, the Orthodox Church, it was what I knew and was comfortable with. So when the projectors came down to, the singing of the whatever hymns they had there, it felt like an assembly class from grade school to me. And I told my ex-husband, soon-to-be husband at the time, that I felt it was empty. I didn't feel the Holy Spirit there. And he said, that's fine. We'll go to your church next. So we did. And at that point in time, we started going regularly. We went to catechism class together. And this is the time when my dad, had come to church, and he started going to catechism classes with us, which was great. And then my ex-husband and my dad were brought into the church at the same time that day. I think it was early January. And that's my story. I don't even know if I would be called a retread, because did I really know enough to leave the faith and come back? Maybe it was just realizing, learning my faith, and then becoming a practicing Christian, Orthodox Christian. So that's my story. And, it was funny because when I first read the Bible, I thought, oh, wow. I learned all these things. And I thought, oh, my gosh, I didn't know any of these things. And that's when I first learned about the Holy Spirit. I didn't know about the Trinity, obviously, from the beginning. But I learned it, in the catechism class, all that stuff I learned. And reading the Bible, I learned things. And I think that was a big deal to figure all that out. Now, of course, I went through the whole convert zeal stage, and eventually, I just calmed down, and I am where I am now. I've had ups and downs. I've been deserts and things. I mean, that's just normal life, but that's what happened to me, and I wanted to share that with you. And so I will let you go because I end up so long on these videos, and I apologize for that. But thank you for watching this, and if you would, please follow my channel, like my videos, share my videos with others, and I have another video later on to share with you for the Sunday subject matter. And so I will be back until next time. Have a good afternoon.